Maria had been walking for hours, maybe longer than she realized. The cold wind of late winter kept pushing against her face, and every step felt heavier because she carried not only her bag but the weight of her recent life. Her husband had passed away suddenly only 2 months ago, and the small rented home they lived in was taken from her soon after. She did not blame anyone. Life in the old western towns was hard for everyone. Still, when she found herself standing outside her own door with nothing left but the clothes she wore and a small bag of cooking tools, she felt as if the world had closed one chapter without telling her how to begin the next. She walked into the small town hoping someone might need a cook. People had known her for years. They knew her as the woman who made warm bread for church gatherings, who prepared stew that tasted better than any fancy dish from the city, and who always shared food with neighbors who had less. Cooking was the one thing she had always done with love. The one thing she knew she could offer in return for a safe place to sleep. But the town was too tight in winter. Every home had just enough food for its own family. Every spare room was already taken by a cousin, a sister, or a friend of someone. No one had ill feelings toward Maria. They simply had no space. A few people gave her warm smiles and told her they wished they could help more. One woman pressed 2 apples into her hand. A shopkeeper gave her a cup of hot tea. But no room and no work meant she could not stay in town for long. A kind older woman, Mrs. Green, who ran the bakery, finally spoke to her with a gentle voice. She touched Maria's cold hand and said, "There is one person outside of town who might offer shelter. He lives alone on a ranch. A good man. Quiet, but good. His name is Luke." Maria had heard of Luke only once or twice. He was the cowboy who lived on the North Ranch. The one people said kept to himself and spoke mostly to his horses. She felt nervous at the thought of asking a stranger for help, but she didn't have another choice. She thanked Mrs. Green, warmed her hands one last time by the bakery stove, and began walking toward the ranch. The sky was turning soft with evening blue when she reached the long dirt path leading to Luke's home. The ranch was peaceful, with fields stretching far on each side. A few cows grazed lazily, and a dog lifted its head and watched her approach with calm curiosity. Maria tightened her fingers around her bag strap and steadied her breath. She knocked on the wooden door, her hand shaking not from cold but from fear of what he might say. When Luke opened the door, he didn't speak right away. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face that looked serious but not unkind. His hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to the elbows, as if she had interrupted him in the middle of a chore. He looked at her with quiet eyes, waiting for her to speak first. Maria felt her heart pounding as she explained her situation. She told him she had nowhere to go, no money left, and no family who could take her in. She told him she wasn't asking for charity. She could cook, clean, and help with whatever he needed. All she needed was a roof over her head, until she could stand on her feet again. Luke listened without interrupting. His face stayed calm, but she could see him noticing her tired hands, her worn boots, and the exhaustion hidden behind her polite voice. She tried her best to stay steady, even though she feared he might say he lived alone for a reason. She braced herself for a gentle refusal. Instead, he stepped back slightly, still watching her. He took a breath, rubbed his thumb against the edge of the door, and said something she did not expect at all. "I'll give you shelter," he said slowly, "but only on one condition." Maria's heart sank for a moment because she didn't know what that condition could be. She nodded, ready to agree to almost anything honest and fair. "You can cook here," he continued, "but you have to promise me something. You must season every meal, with a bit of laughter too." Maria blinked, confused at first. She wasn't sure if he was teasing or trying to test her. But then she saw the tiniest smile tug at the corner of his mouth, a soft expression that warmed the seriousness on his face. For the first time in days, her own lips lifted into a real smile. "I can try," she replied softly, her voice steadying. "I haven't laughed much lately, but I can try." He gave a small nod, pleased, and opened the door wider. Then come in. It's too cold to be standing out there. Maria stepped inside, and warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. The house was simple and quiet, with sturdy wooden furniture, clean floors, and a faint smell of coffee and firewood. It wasn't fancy, but to her it felt like a palace after weeks of uncertainty. Luke showed her the guest room, a modest space with a neatly made bed, a small window overlooking the ranch, and a thick blanket folded at the end. When she touched the blanket, she felt an unexpected rush of gratitude. She turned toward Luke, ready to thank him, but he spoke before she could. "Rest first," he said. "Then tomorrow, you can make us both breakfast. We'll figure things out one day at a time." Maria nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She watched him leave the room quietly, giving her space. When the door closed, she sat on the bed and held her hands together. The room felt safe. The silence felt peaceful, not empty. A warmth bloomed inside her chest, a feeling she had not allowed herself to feel in months. Not hope exactly, but the beginning of it. Later that evening, she went to the kitchen to drink some water. She found Luke sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He looked up as she entered, and she felt shy in the quiet room. He asked if she wanted coffee too, but she refused politely, saying she didn't want to waste anything. He surprised her by getting up and pouring her a cup anyway. "It's not waste if someone needs it," he said, placing the cup before her. She thanked him and sat down across from him. They didn't talk much, but the silence didn't feel tense. She felt him studying her with gentle curiosity, not judgment. She wrapped her fingers around the warm cup and let the heat calm her. As she sipped the coffee, she thought about how strange life could be. That morning, she had no idea where she would sleep. That afternoon, she had felt close to giving up. And now she sat inside a safe home, across from a man who had agreed to help her without asking for anything more than a little laughter. She found herself quietly grateful for people like him, people who spoke little but acted with kindness. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring or how long she would stay here. But she knew one thing. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was no longer alone in the world. She lifted the cup to her lips again and told herself to breathe easily. Tonight, she had a bed. Tonight, she had warmth. Tonight, she had hope. And as she finished her coffee, she whispered a soft promise to herself. She would earn her place here with honest work, warm meals, and most importantly, a little laughter. Just like Luke asked. Maria woke early the next morning, long before the sun had fully risen. For a few seconds, she lay still, unsure of where she was. The quiet room, the warm blanket, and the soft light creeping through the window were unfamiliar. Then she remembered she was in Luke's ranch house. She wasn't outside in the cold. She wasn't wandering from door to door. She had a roof over her head, at least for now. She sat up and breathed deeply. Her body felt lighter than it had in weeks, though her heart still carried the quiet pain of her past. She didn't want to waste time or appear ungrateful, so she slipped out of bed, tied her hair back, and walked toward the kitchen. The house was peaceful, with only the sound of the wind brushing softly against the windows. She could smell firewood, meaning Luke had woken earlier than she had. When she entered the kitchen, she found him sitting at the table with a small notebook and a pencil. He looked up, as if he had been expecting her. "Morning," he said simply. "Good morning," she replied with a small smile. He closed his notebook and nodded toward the counter. "Everything you might need is there. Use anything you want." Maria placed her bag of cooking tools on the counter and took stock of what the kitchen had. There were eggs, a sack of flour, fresh milk, potatoes, and a few herbs she recognized from her old kitchen garden. She surprised herself with how emotional she felt seeing simple ingredients. She had missed cooking not just because it provided food, but because it made her feel useful, steady, and connected. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She moved quietly but gracefully, cracking eggs, stirring batter, and slicing potatoes. Luke pretended to read his notebook again, but he glanced at her more often than he admitted to himself. There was something calming about watching her move around the kitchen, as if her presence softened the quiet edges of the house. When she placed breakfast on the table, warm eggs, fried potatoes, and soft bread, Luke looked surprised. "You made all this in just a little time?" he asked. "It helps when you've cooked every day for years," she answered softly. "Cooking keeps me steady." He tasted the food carefully, almost shyly. Then he nodded with approval. "It's good." The simple praise warmed her. She hadn't heard someone compliment her cooking since her husband was alive. She didn't try to show her emotion. She just smiled down at her plate. For a while they ate in comfortable quiet. Then, Maria remembered his unusual condition from yesterday. "You said I should season the meals with laughter," she said lightly. Luke paused mid-bite, and a small smile formed. "And have you done that?" She thought for a second, tapping her chin. "Well, I did smile at the eggs before cooking them." Luke raised an eyebrow. "What good does that do?" "Maybe it gives them courage." He let out a small, soft laugh. It was so unexpected that she blinked in surprise. She hadn't seen him laugh before, not even in the slightest. The sound was gentle, but warm enough to fill the whole room. "Courageous eggs," he repeated. "Not sure I've heard that one." "Well, there's a first time for everything," she teased. Luke shook his head but kept smiling. He didn't say it aloud, but her presence was already beginning to brighten the ranch in ways he hadn't expected. After breakfast, Maria insisted on washing the dishes. Luke tried to tell her she didn't need to do everything at once, but she shook her head firmly. "I want to help," she said. "This is the least I can do." When the dishes were done, she followed Luke outside to see the ranch in daylight. The sun was rising over the fields, coloring everything in soft gold. The cattle were quiet, the horses calm, and the wind smelled like clean grass. Maria wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, but because the open space was beautiful and overwhelming. Luke began feeding the animals, moving with practiced ease. Maria watched him for a moment, and then asked, "Can I help with something?" He hesitated. "These chores aren't easy." "I'm not weak," she said gently. Luke studied her face and saw she meant it. So he handed her a small bucket and asked her to feed the chickens. She took the task seriously, talking softly to the chickens, as if they were children. Luke almost laughed again when he heard her asking them to behave. "You talk to everything, don't you?" he asked. She shrugged. "Talking makes things feel less lonely." Luke didn't say it aloud, but he understood that better than anyone. As the days passed, a rhythm formed between them. Maria cooked breakfast every morning. Luke worked outside while she cleaned or organized the kitchen. She learned how to do small ranch chores and didn't hesitate to help whenever she could. Sometimes, she joined him for work in the barn, brushing the horses or helping him carry supplies. Luke found himself quietly impressed by her determination. She didn't complain, even when tasks were tiring. She didn't break down, even when something reminded her of her past. She was steady and brave in ways she didn't even seem aware of. One evening, after a long day of helping him repair a fence, she sat on the porch steps while Luke leaned against the railing. The sky was turning pink and orange, and the air felt peaceful. "You don't have to work this hard," Luke said softly, watching her catch her breath. "I want to," she replied. "I want to feel like I'm part of something again." Luke looked at her profile, the gentle curve of her cheek, the calm expression even in tiredness. He spoke quietly, as if afraid to disturb the moment. "You're part of this place already." Maria looked down at her hands, touched by his words. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply said, "Thank you." When night came, she returned to her room. But sleep didn't come easily. Memories of her husband surfaced, not painful memories, but quiet ones. She wondered if she was allowed to feel safe again, to start life in a different way. She wasn't sure. But she knew one thing. The loneliness that had controlled her for months was beginning to loosen its grip. Around midnight, Luke passed by her door and heard a soft, trembling sound. He paused. It was the sound of someone trying not to cry. He didn't knock. He didn't want to intrude. Instead, he went to the kitchen, lit a small lantern, and placed it outside her door with a folded note. In the morning, Maria opened her door and found the lantern first. "Light this when you need company." Her eyes burned with emotion, but not the painful kind. This was the kind that softened the heart, not broke it. She held the note close to her chest and whispered to herself, "This house is kinder than I expected." From that day forward, something changed between them. Maria didn't feel like a burden. Luke didn't treat her like one. They spoke more during meals, laughed at small mistakes, shared simple stories of their pasts, and found comfort in each other's presence. The ranch no longer felt like a silent place. It felt like a home, learning to breathe again. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both felt it. They were slowly becoming important to each other. Days passed slowly on the ranch, each one a little brighter than the day before. Maria settled into the rhythm of life there, and Luke adjusted to sharing his home with someone who brought warmth without even trying. But peaceful days never last forever. The world had its own way of testing people when they finally began to breathe again. One afternoon, while Maria was kneading dough for the evening's meal, she heard a horse approaching from outside. The sound was fast. Too fast for a casual visitor. Luke, who had been cleaning his tools near the barn, stepped outside to look. The moment he saw who was riding toward the house, his jaw tightened slightly. Maria wiped her hands and stepped onto the porch. She saw a tall man with a rough, impatient expression. His horse kicked up dust as he pulled it to a stop. He had a familiar angle to his face, but Maria couldn't place him at first. Then fear flickered across her eyes, she remembered. The man, named Carter, had once worked with her late husband. He was loud, stubborn, and known for getting into trouble. He had borrowed money from her husband long ago and never repaid a cent. When her husband died, Carter had claimed Maria owed him instead, twisting the story in his favor. He had tried to force her to work for him, to pay the debt, even though the debt had never truly been hers. Maria stepped back without meaning to. Luke saw the fear in her eyes immediately. Carter climbed down from his horse with a smirk. "There you are, Maria," he said loudly, his tone confident, as if he had full claim over her life. "You left town before we finished our talk." Maria shook her head slowly. "I don't owe you anything. You know that." Carter walked closer, ignoring her words. "Your husband owed me. A debt doesn't disappear just because he did. You come with me. You work for me, and the debt gets paid." She trembled, but her voice remained gentle. Carter scoffed and pointed at her small bag near the porch. "You don't have money. You don't have family. You need a roof. I'm offering one." Before Maria could speak again, Luke stepped forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a calm strength. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." Carter looked Luke up and down and laughed. "And who are you? The hero? Of the ranch?" Luke didn't flinch. "The man whose home she's living in." Carter raised his eyebrows, surprised to see Maria staying with someone. "Really? You found yourself a new place to hide already?" Maria clenched her jaw. Before she could defend herself, Luke stepped in front of her protectively, blocking Carter's view of her. "She doesn't need to explain herself," Luke said quietly. "And she isn't hiding. She's working here. And she's safe here." Carter's eyes narrowed. "She's coming with me. This is between us." "No," Luke replied. There was no anger in Luke's voice, only certainty. It made Carter's smirk fade a little. After a long moment, Carter shrugged, pretending not to care. "Fine. Keep her. But don't think this is over. She owes me." Maria spoke softly, gathering her courage. "I owe you nothing, Carter. Please leave." Carter stared at her, annoyed to see a strength he hadn't expected. With a huff, he climbed back onto his horse. "We'll see," he muttered, before riding off. When the dust cleared, Maria let out a breath she had been holding. Her legs felt weak. Luke turned to her gently. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, though her voice shook. I thought he might take me. I thought he would force me." She pressed a hand to her chest. "Thank you for standing up for me." Luke shook his head. "You shouldn't have to thank anyone for protecting you. You're a good woman, Maria. No one has the right to treat you like property." Tears filled her eyes, not of fear, but of relief. Luke stepped closer, his tone calm but firm. "You didn't bring trouble. Someone else tried to bring it. That's different. And it doesn't change anything." Maria looked at him with a soft expression, touched by how easily he accepted her presence and her past. Later that day, after Carter had left, Maria felt a deep need to contribute, to show Luke she wasn't helpless. She went back to her dough but realized her hands were trembling. She forced herself to keep working, determined not to appear weak. Luke, seeing this from the corner of his eye, walked over and gently placed a hand on the table. "Maria," he said softly, "you don't have to pretend you're fine." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tired emotion. "I don't want to trouble you. You've done enough." Luke shook his head. "You're not trouble." Those 3 words sank into her chest like warm sunlight. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself feel the truth in them. That evening, Maria made a simple meal: vegetable soup, warm bread, and baked apples. She worked quietly, but Luke noticed the care she put into every movement. He could tell she was trying to hold herself steady after being shaken. During dinner, Luke made a gentle attempt at humor. "So, did you laugh at the soup today?" Maria blinked, then gave a small smile. "A little. A little laugh in the soup. That's progress," he teased softly. His effort brought a laugh out of her, a real, warm laugh that surprised even her. Luke smiled, glad to hear it. After they ate, Maria insisted on helping with evening chores. Luke hesitated, but she looked determined. So he brought her to the barn and taught her how to brush the mare named Daisy. Maria stroked the horse's mane, speaking softly to her. The mare leaned into the touch, as if understanding Maria's gentle heart. "You're good with animals," Luke noted. "They listen," Maria replied. "Sometimes better than people do." Luke gave a small smile. "Depends on the people." The hours passed quietly, and the ranch settled into calm again. But Maria couldn't stop thinking about Carter's threat. As she brushed Daisy's mane, she asked softly, "Do you think he'll come back?" Luke leaned on a wooden post, thinking, "Maybe. Maybe not. But even if he does, he can't take you. You're not alone here." Maria turned toward him slowly. The barn lantern cast a warm glow on his face, highlighting the steadiness in his eyes. She felt something deep shift inside her. Something safe. Something new. "You make me feel protected," she admitted quietly. Luke looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You deserve to feel safe, Maria. Everyone does." The barn fell silent again, but it was a peaceful silence, the kind that made 2 people feel less alone in the world. As days turned into a week and the fear of Carter slowly faded, Maria began helping Luke more than ever. She fetched water, cleaned the barn, learned how to fix a few tools, and even tried to help with the cattle. Luke would often glance her way, surprised by her strength and her determination to contribute. She didn't know it, but Luke admired her deeply, not because she worked hard, but because she carried her pain with quiet dignity, because she didn't give up, even when life pushed her down, because she brought laughter into a place that had forgotten what warmth felt like. One night, after closing the barn, they walked side by side toward the house. The air was cool, the sky full of stars. "Luke," she said softly, Thank you for everything you do. You didn't have to help me, but you did. Luke stopped walking and looked at her. Maria, you brought something back to this home. Something I didn't even know I was missing. What's that? She asked, her voice gentle. Life, he said quietly, and a bit of laughter too. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She looked at him with soft eyes, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The night felt different after that. Neither spoke again for the rest of the walk. But they didn't need to. Because sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Spring slowly pushed its way across the land, melting the cold edges of winter until the ranch felt warmer in both weather and spirit. Maria had now been living with Luke for several weeks, and something gentle had grown between them, something unspoken, something warm. Neither rushed it, neither forced it. It simply lived between them like a quiet flame that grew brighter every day they shared. One morning, Maria woke before sunrise as usual and made her way to the kitchen. As she stirred the batter for breakfast, she hummed softly, a habit she didn't even notice she had picked up. Luke stepped into the kitchen just then, quietly watching her for a moment before she noticed him. You're in a good mood, he said, leaning against the doorframe with crossed arms. Maria turned, startled but smiling. Must be the eggs again, he teased. Maybe they're the ones laughing now. She shook her head, laughing gently. You'll blame everything on the eggs at this rate. Luke chuckled. A sound she had grown used to, and secretly enjoyed. He walked to the table and sat down, still watching her. The way she moved, calm, confident, peaceful, made the house feel alive in a way it hadn't for a long time. After breakfast, Maria cleaned up while Luke prepared things for his morning chores. When she brought him his hat, he paused, taking it from her hand more slowly than necessary. Their fingers brushed lightly. Neither pulled away immediately. Their eyes met warm brown, meeting gentle hazel, and Maria felt her breath catch for a moment. Thank you, Luke said softly. You're welcome, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Something passed between them in that quiet second, something deeper than the friendly kindness they had shared before. Maria looked down shyly, and Luke cleared his throat, stepping toward the door. But he paused again before leaving. Maria, he said without turning fully. You don't have to push yourself so hard on the chores today. It's a long week. Rest a little. She smiled. I will. Maybe. Luke's lips twitched. You never rest when you say you will. She shrugged. Rest feels strange now. Work feels normal. He gave a small nod before stepping outside. Maria watched him walk across the yard. She didn't know exactly when it had happened, but she had begun to feel a sense of comfort in watching him move through his day, feeding the horses, fixing fences, cleaning the barn. His presence felt steady, safe, and familiar. Later that afternoon, Maria baked a small batch of sweet bread, the kind she used to make for her late husband during good seasons. The smell filled the kitchen with a soft warmth. When Luke walked in for water, he paused with surprise in his eyes. What's that smell? He asked. Something sweet, she said, setting the loaf on the table. I haven't made it in a long time. I wanted to try again. Luke leaned over the loaf and breathed in deeply. Smells like peace. Maria had not expected that answer, and her cheeks warmed. Luke tore a small piece off and tasted it, nodding slowly. It's good, he said. She waited. He smiled a little more. It's really good. Her laughter filled the kitchen, light and easy. Luke smiled again, watching her. It amazed him how natural it felt, seeing her happy. He had lived alone for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to share moments that made life softer. In the late afternoon, Maria helped Luke repair a loose board on the barn wall. He held the board in place while she hammered it. At one point, she swung too gently, and the nail barely moved. Luke raised an eyebrow. You call that a hammer swing? Maria huffed. I didn't want to break the board. It's a board, Maria, not glass. She tried again but hit crookedly this time. Luke tried not to laugh, but a small sound escaped. Maria turned to him with a narrowed gaze. "Are you laughing at me?" He shook his head, trying to look serious. "No. I'm laughing near you." "Oh, really?" she asked. He nodded. "Big difference." She laughed, handing him the hammer. "Fine. You do it. Show me how the great cowboy fixes everything." Luke smirked, took the hammer, and drove the nail in with one sure strike. Maria rolled her eyes dramatically, making him laugh again. Working together became their new normal, a rhythm so natural that it didn't feel like work anymore. When they finished the barn repairs, they stood outside, leaning against the fence, watching the sun fall behind the hills. Maria hugged her arms to her chest. "I didn't think I'd ever feel peaceful again." Luke's eyes moved to her gently. "You deserve peace, Maria." She looked out at the fields. "I didn't realize how much I needed a place that felt like home." Luke swallowed slowly. "Does this place feel like that?" Maria nodded. "It does." Luke's heartbeat grew steady, purposeful. That evening, Maria cooked a simple but special meal, adding her small personal touches to each dish. As they ate, she noticed that Luke was more quiet than usual, not distant, just thinking deeply. She didn't ask anything. She had learned that Luke spoke when he was ready. After dinner, Luke stepped outside for a moment. Maria followed quietly, standing beside him on the porch. The stars were bright, scattered across the sky like tiny lanterns. Luke breathed in deeply. Then he turned slightly toward her. "Maria," he said softly, "I want you to stay." Her breath caught. She turned her head slowly, looking up at him. "You don't have to cook for me to stay. You don't have to work for me to stay," he continued. "I want you here because you matter to this home. Because you brought light back into it. Because when you laugh, the whole place changes." Maria felt her heart swell, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. "Then don't say anything," he replied gently. "Just tell me if you feel the same." Maria didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer, close enough that their hands almost touched. Her voice came out soft and honest. "I feel safe here. I feel alive again. I didn't think I could feel that way. Not after everything I lost." She looked into his eyes, her voice trembling in the sweetest way. "You gave me shelter, Luke, but you also gave me myself back." Luke's chest tightened, full of a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "I only asked for a little laughter," he said softly. "And you gave me a home." Maria laughed gently through her emotion. "And you gave me a place to breathe again." They stood there in a peaceful silence, their hearts speaking louder than any words. Luke reached out slowly, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Stay," he whispered. Maria nodded, her eyes shimmering. "I will." "Not. I will." From that moment on, the ranch became more than a shelter for a widow. It became a place where two lonely souls rebuilt their lives side by side, sharing meals, sharing laughter, and sharing a quiet bond that needed no name. Maria continued to season every meal with laughter, just as Luke had asked on the first day. But over time, they realized something simple and beautiful. It wasn't the laughter that made their home warm. It was each other.